The following podcast may contain adult language and an abundance of salt. So get ready, nerds, because we're talking the psychological thriller, Cube. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us on this very special episode of the Salty Nerd Podcast, where we get to talk to the people behind the curtain on the influential movie Cube from 1997. I'm joined, as always, by my fantastic panel of nerds. Matt Vader's here. What's up, dude? There's a lot of people here.
4 people staring, 3 people staring at us from the nether over there.
I know. This is
We are
crazy.
freaking out.
We're up in our game.
He's so delicate.
I'm also joined by our ambassador of estrogen, Jude is here.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm excellent. My heart's beating like crazy right now.
Settle down. Act like you've been here before.
I haven't even had any coffee today. Also joining us, the producer of the show and the man making the magic happen, Matthew Kadish.
So I'm very excited to get to talk to the people behind this amazing movie. But it's also nice to have my best friend David Hewlett on the podcast again.
Oh my God.
So speaking
Because
of,
I get you.
He gets me.
Yeah.
He really gets me. Yeah.
Our guest of honor today, of course, David Hewlett is here. Welcome, sir. How are you doing?
Very good, very good. I'm glad I could drag my fellow friends and nerds into this podcasting nonsense.
Also joining us, the screenwriter, Andre Bijelic. Welcome, sir. How are you doing?
Thank you. Good. Pleasure to be here.
And the director behind the movie, Vincenzo Natali. How are you doing, sir?
I'm ready to get salty.
Yes. Excellent. We love that. All right, guys, so how this is going to work is we're going to sit down. We're going to ask these guys a bunch of nerdy questions about this movie. So hopefully if you've seen the movie and you have all these questions about it, we're going to have those answered for you by the people who made the movie. And as always, we're honored to have you guys on. We're very, very excited. We're movie nerds ourselves, so this is going to be a lot of fun. So, Kadish, this is kind of like a dream come true for you. Would you like to start off with the first question?
I would, actually.
Are you going to start off by saying, we're not
Worthy.
worthy?
Yeah, we're totally not worthy here. So like this is, Cube was a very influential movie in the late 90s because I remember, being in high school, like wanting to be a filmmaker, getting into the like film school and stuff like that. It was one of those films that kind of came out of nowhere, and it was an independent production from Canada that kind of took the indie world by storm. Like it wasn't a big hit in the theaters for whatever reason, but on home video and on paid cable, the film school community found it. And we just obsessed over this movie because it was like, wow, there's like one set, there's like a small group of actors. It's truly low budget filmmaking, but it's sci-fi and it looks big budget. Mm-hmm. And it was like a big inspiration to like a lot of like people, especially around that time, because the indie kind of like film world was starting to kind of peak in that time because you had Kevin Smith, Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez, and all that stuff. And Vincenzo just came out with this like tour de force of a first film because this was like your first feature, right, Vincenzo?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm terrible with names.
He is the
No, that's
great
right.
unpronouncer.
You call me anything. I answer to all.
It's true.
All
He's answered to far worse.
David and Andre will attest to it.
But this was all 3 of yours first movie, right?
Yep.
Not David.
Not mine.
Oh,
David
yeah,
was a
right.
goddamn movie star.
What movie had you done before this, David?
Many movies.
It's been a few, yeah. It's like Pin and Scanners and a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, you'd worked with John Borman at that point.
Oh, that's right, of course. Yeah. It's funny because I always loved that they would talk about Cube and they'd say like it's first time director and just a cast of nobodies. I've done a couple of things Well, it was always like nobody, you don't recognize anybody in it. They're all newcomers.
But what's funny is like you went on to be part of like one of the biggest sci-fi franchises ever, Stargate Atlantis,
because of Cube. They like Cube. That's why they brought me in because they'd seen Cube.
And Nicole DeBoer went on to go on to Star Trek. So in a way, like you guys were ahead of the curve.
We owe Vincenzo everything. Yeah, whatever. Vincenzo and Andre.
So far ahead, we're behind.
Yeah. It's like the iPad.
Yeah.
It was written with David in mind for that role. David and Andrew Miller, who played Kazan, those roles. Not that Andrew was like Kazan, but those roles were written with them in mind.
Well, you guys are all childhood friends, right?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, Vincenzo and I have known each other since we were, 10 or something?
8.
And
Try 8.
8.
And
Yeah.
don't say how many years ago that was.
And David came in a little later when we were in high school, but yeah, it's been a long
I'm like
time.
their new friend at age 14 or 15 or something.
We've only known David for 35 years.
Yeah. Well, it's almost 40 at this point.
Almost 40. Oh yeah, almost 40. Yeah.
You basically need scientific notation to talk about how long we've been, friends at this
You
point.
can measure it in geologic time.
Exactly. That's it.
So what inspired you guys to kind of like decide to work together for this movie? Because I understand you guys made like a short film in an elevator to kind of sell the idea of this movie. But what, like, were you guys just like, hey, we're all friends, like, let's make a movie together? How did this come about?
We go back even further, don't we? I mean, when was it, Vincenzo? We talked to, it was a summer.
Are we in the Jurassic period or the pre-Cambrian?
Are we
period?
talking when we all started? It would have been 84, right? With Exam, which was a short film about a student who goes into an exam that he's not prepared for and ends up shooting his teacher, which I'm sure we'd now be in at minimum in a psychiatrist's office at this point, if not in prison.
But that was the 80s. It was totally different back then.
Yeah, you get away with a lot more in the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a cry for help now. Then it was like, wow, well done, lads. You made a movie.
Twitter would be on fire.
Absolutely. And then I run into traffic and get run over at the end anyways, don't I? Isn't that the... Yeah.
Another feel-good film.
Yeah.
But Andre and I Andre introduced me to movie making because he had a Super 8 camera. And I guess maybe when we were around 11 years old, we started messing around with that. And then and Andre was always the superior writer. So he was the one really more to craft the stories. And then we'd make these Super 8 films and we would take turns acting. Andre's a better actor than I am, but neither of us are very good. And then one day I guess, I don't know how, but it occurred to us, maybe we should actually get somebody who can act to be in one of these things. But that time it had become quite a serious endeavor. Every summer that would be our thing to do. We'd make a movie. And so, around, I guess it was 1984, David was the go-to thespian at my school. And I came up to him and said, how would you like to be in a movie? And of course he said, what kind of movie?
I was like, who is this little nerd? I'm going to be a thespian.
And then here we are nearly 40 years later.
It was even worse asking that question to a girl in high school.
Oh,
Do you want to be in a movie?
I didn't even think about that, of course.
It didn't really occur to me at the time. But.
That's dangerous ground, huh? I didn't think
And
about
we
that.
didn't talk to a lot of girls anyway, to be
Hey,
fair.
baby, you want to be in a movie?
Yeah.
Make you a star. Make you a star.
We didn't know how cheesy we were.
We're filming it in my backyard.
We filmed it at our own school. We filmed it at the school we were attending, and they let us use it. Yeah, we shot our English teacher.
Yeah, literally shot him.
So, Vincenzo, is it much the same nowadays where you just call up Hewlett and is like, hey, you want to be in a movie?
Yeah, that is literally what I did. The last thing I did was exactly that. David, you can tell them.
To be fair, I call and say, "Can I be in the movie?" A lot more. Like I used to be, At first, I was, the snobbery of the teenager. No, but literally, that is literally how it works. Literally, like, yeah. I don't even ask what it is.
Well, you can say. Do you want to talk about what we just?
Yeah,
did?
the last thing. So the last call I got was Vincenzo said, "Do you want to come and? I've got this thing with Guillermo at this cabinet of curiosities. Do you want to do it?" And I'm like, "Let me check my schedule." Yes. And then I asked about what it was. And that's when I found out that I'd have rats on my face and I'd be crawling through corridors
and he's still going through physio.
I'm still at physio. I'm actually going to a specialist for my shoulders now because because it turns out that I act like this. This is my acting mode. So which is
you're also not 15 anymore, which doesn't help.
There's that. Yeah. But going back to the summers, like that, the thing that blew me away, and I think I can single-handedly say that single-handedly the two of them made me a bankable actor because they were so professional even back then with the exam. It was well organized. There were like little call sheets. They were like, it was all treated very seriously, and yet it was incredibly fun. So it was like it was treated like a job, but it had this wonderful sense of joy to the whole and exploration of the process.
It's kind of like our podcast.
Exactly.
Vincenzo, it's like I'm the one who does the call sheets and tells everyone what to do, and they tell me to go fuck off.
We're like, what is this paper you're giving me?
Yeah. He's like, I've got notes for you this morning. I'm like, get out of here, man. No.
I just show up and drink and talk. That's what I do.
Well, that's what I did. But, but yeah, it was just amazing because then the first audition I went to, I already knew how to hit marks, how to what they were talking about when they were talking about how to film stuff. Even the idea that you could understand.
And the camera wasn't like whirring right in front of you.
Yeah, what did they use for that the first one? What was the film? What did you film on? It was like
the first one was Super 8, but then when we got that 16 millimeter one that was making like a ton of noise.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly soundproofed.
No.
It was like putting a sewing machine on a desk and filming a scene with it.
So Andre, I've got a question for you. I love looking back and seeing what influences filmmakers to make the movies that they're famous for. And like I look back at like Steven Spielberg for making Indiana Jones and working with George Lucas, and that came from like Zorro and James Bond, and Star Wars came from like Kurosawa films and Buck Rogers and stuff. What was it that you were watching at the time that kind of sparked that influence to make this movie?
We looked at, obviously we looked at a lot of prison stuff, prison escape movies, stuff like Escape from Alcatraz. Stalag 17 was a big one. In fact, David's character is pretty similar to the William Holden character in Stalag 17. A lot of submarine movies. Das Boot was a big inspiration. But yeah, I mean, everything from that to certainly Kubrick, I think in the look of it, certainly helped inspire a lot of stuff.
I'm just now realizing Vincenzo's shirt is Kubrick's run
Yeah.
from The Shining, and I'm
The Shining.
freaking out about it right now.
Yeah.
The Shining, 2001 were big ones. Alien, the first two Alien and Aliens, I think were big ones. But, everything from that to Bugs Bunny that inspired the opening. Or actually, I guess it wasn't Bugs Bunny. It was when Sylvester runs through was it like a tennis net or something? And little bits of him fall down. That actually inspired the opening scene.
Yeah, that's very twisted. I love it. One of the biggest things I noticed about this movie, and I wanted to ask you guys, like, what was the decision-making process behind opening up this movie with such a hard hit? Like, there's a character nobody knows. We have no idea what the circumstance or setting is, but here's like one of the most gruesome kill scenes in the movie, and I would say it's probably one of the most influential scenes because I know P.W.S. Anderson ripped it off.
It's definitely iconic.
Yeah, it's an iconic movie or scene. So, like, what was the decision making? Like, let's hit it right off the bat. First thing people get into was that a hook, or what was your choice for that?
It was definitely. It probably came from. Both of us were big Raiders of the Lost Ark and James Bond fans as kids, and those movies open in that way. There's that kind of scene that doesn't really have much to do with the movie, but it's kind of the whole movie in microcosm. It's kind of like, okay, this is setting it up. This is what you're in for the next 2 hours or 90 minutes or whatever. So that's probably where that came from.
It's become the normal now. Like, it's like every movie now starts with, I'm not sure the Cube was the reason for it, but certainly it was the first time I'd seen it, but it's something that happens now that you have to have some kind of a big hit off the top to drag people into a movie now. Like, that's just, and apparently when they went to basically online releases of films recently during the pandemic and stuff, they were saying they were actually recutting. Like, Disney was recutting movies to make stuff happen faster because they were concerned that people would switch.
Well, now you have to, right? Because there's so many options for people if you don't hook them in the first scene.
The TikTok generation.
Actually, and Andre is editing now. So Andre, do you feel like from when you started doing that to now, is there a different sort of pace that you're asked to?
Well, definitely. I mean, if you hold onto a shot for more than like 3 seconds, it starts to feel, oh, this is too long. I feel like I need to cut it. But it's weird though, because movies now they're both too fast and too long. Like, I don't remember the last time I saw a movie that I didn't feel was at least 20 minutes too long.
That's the name for the next Fast and Furious. The next Fast and Furious movie. Too fast and too long. Yeah.
If you spend $300 million, you better pump out more than 90 minutes of footage.
Well, yeah. Now Batman has to be 3 hours long.
Yeah,
Is Batman 3 hours?
Yeah,
Almost.
and like you said, it's about 30 minutes too long.
Yeah.
and it's funny because like when we do our normal like movie review shows, like we edit in contextual clips of the movies, and I find that like it's very rare to find a shot that lasts longer than 5 seconds in any movie. But one of the interesting things about the opening of your film is like the actor you cast, he's this like bald guy with like the big nose and like the gaunt face. Yeah. And I was like, and he's the guy who's on the cover or the poster of the movie. And I'm just like, you found the creepiest looking guy you could possibly find to open this movie with. What was the thought process behind that?
Well, Julian is a known actor here in Toronto, and he had been in a short film that a friend of ours named John Fawcett made while he was at the Canadian Film Centre, which is the same institution that made Cube.
John Fawcett of Orphan Black fame.
Right, John Fawcett, who famously, and also Ginger Snaps, who, for those who know and love that movie. And John had cast him as a vampire, and so we were aware of Julian, and who has a very striking look, but is also actually a very good actor. And I think Andre and I, at that time, were wanting to give this character something that gave him specificity and personality, even though he never says anything in his entire time. So there's something intriguing about him. And then also there's just the practical reality that Julian's face casts really well. I mean, you can make a replica of it, a physical silicone replica of it really well. And that's why we put him in it.
We did a play together. Andrew Miller and I, before this, had done a play, and Julian Richling's played one of these bizarre-looking teachers in Spring Awakening back at before that. So
that's a good little Cube trivia footnote. So Andrew, who is kind of the fourth musketeer here, who you're not seeing, who plays Kazan, met David in a production of Spring Awakening, which many years later would become a massive Broadway success. But
as a musical, we did it seriously. It was just, we didn't.
But these guys were in a Canadian incarnation of it many years before. And then I guess so was Julian. So it was kind of a little preview of Cube.
Toronto was a small pool for a while there. It's larger now, but there was definitely a little group of people who worked a lot. I mean, the industry was there was a lot of American stuff coming up to shoot up here, and it was rare to have, it's very rare to have a Cube, because normally films were American films that came up and the parts were available were these little tiny, one-liners here and there. The idea of having like an indigenous Canadian production, and that was actually of a genre type, was very, very rare at the time.
I was wondering what the thought behind naming all of the characters after institutions was. And is there a reason why Levin and Worth have it's the same prison name, right? Like, is there supposed to be a connection there that I didn't get?
I think it was just sort of a cutesy thing that we did.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of like, we'll just name them all after prisons.
Because you're all in this prisonal cube?
Yeah.
Okay.
You should have said yes.
Yeah. No, that's funny, because that's one of the things I thought when I was watching this movie, and I was like researching it, and I learned the same thing. I'm like, oh, these are all prison names. And like I said before, I'd go and there's YouTube videos that are hours long, just like deep diving this movie. It's like Stanley Kubrick level freaking intrigue. And I'm like, I wonder if they meant to do all this, or if all us cinephiles are just reading way too much into it.
I think it's really funny that there's, like you said, there are studies going into, why do they all have prison names?
Yeah.
And these guys go, it just kind of sounded cool.
Well,
what people intended doesn't really matter in a way. I mean, I don't think that makes an analysis illegitimate just because the people didn't intend it. Because a lot of stuff just comes through subconsciously, I think. Anyway, so.
Well, because Kazan is named after a mental institution, right?
It is, yeah. That one was a little bit deliberate, yeah.
It kind of does.
Well, I was going to say, Vincenzo, like you kind of have this like very interesting like thematic carry through all your movies, where in Cube in particular, the cube itself is this kind of like metaphor for these institutions that we create as a society that don't really serve any purpose, and yet like we commit ourselves to them and we create them and we exist within them, and they just serve to basically kill us. And I always thought it was interesting that the character of Quentin was, he's a police officer, and at the start of the movie, he's the guy that we think is the leader, and he's the one who's going to like protect everyone and stuff like that. And by the end of the movie, he becomes the villain, and he's this police officer who basically ends up upholding the purpose of the institution as like the other characters are trying to escape it, and he's the one who's like, well, this thing's here to kill you, and so I'm going to do its bidding, and I'm going to be the one who kills you. And there's if you want to get really deep into it, like that's like kind of the theme of this movie. And I thought it's so sophisticated, and I was wondering, like, were you guys like purposely layering in that type of stuff in there, or is that just people reading stuff into it?
I always liken the writing of Cube to being like archaeology, because when Andre and I were really working out the mechanics of the thing, basically all we were doing was figuring out what Cartesian math was. We didn't know. We're so stupid. We had no idea. But it was sort of like, but the whole thing, and it's more than just that. It sort of felt like we were discovering something that already existed, oddly enough, rather than creating it. And so I think we kind of stumbled on something that was.
I was just going to say, even before that, I mean, Vincenzo had a script already that he had written that was completely different. It had the same basic premise, but it was it had like all this crazy stuff. No, well, it was interesting, but it had like it wasn't. It was still the Cube, and but there were more characters, and there was like moss or something growing that people were eating, and there was water drippings, and there was like a monster inside this maze that killed people and ate people. There were cannibals. There was all this crazy stuff, and he showed me the script and said, what do you think of it? And I thought it was interesting, but it lacked a kind of a focus, I think, and a drive. It was sort of all over the place, and at that point, I kind of thought, well, what if you just stripped it down and took all of this stuff away and just focused on like a core group of people and focused on the escape? And they have nothing. There's no food, and there's no water, and that gives you this kind of time limit, right? Where if they only have X amount of time to escape, otherwise they're going to die.
And that was the genius stroke that turned it into a movie, because what I had before was very fanciful and Terry Gilliam-ish, but the Andre, who in his typical cutting, laser-sighted way, realized what the movie needed to be, and it became this kind of like stripping all the stuff away to its absolute most simple essence, which is, I think, what makes the movie so durable. Like people keep coming back to it. I think partly because it's so damn simple, and yet it works, and in ways that are surprising and not kind of overly linear or expected. But what Andre did is what crystallized it into a movie. That's when I remember when we had that script. That's when we went. I knew we had something really special. Like I kind of. Okay, because I know I'm a salty geek, right? I'm a salty nerd. Sorry.
We don't talk about those guys.
There's going to be a Twitter account, Salty Geek, in like 2 days.
I'm pretty sure there already is one.
But I know there are a limited number of great science fiction premises that are in movies. There's not a lot, and there's not a lot that you haven't, that in some way don't borrow from each other or aren't, something you've seen before. And I really felt like this one was kind of, and I don't mean to be self-aggrandizing in a way, because again, I feel like it's something we kind of stumbled on. But I knew it was special. I knew that there's nothing like this. And we can probably afford to make it because it's cheap.
Yeah. Well, we were wrong about that part, at least initially.
So other than Andrew and David, who you've already talked about how they kind of came to be in the film, how did you cast the rest of the characters in this? And have you also worked with them in other projects that you've done since then?
We just did a traditional casting process. So the movie was and could only, I believe, have been made with the Canadian Film Center. The Canadian Film Center, I'll give you a very, very Coles Notes version of this whole thing, how the movie got made. So Andre and I wrote the script, and then there were a few kind of, I won't be named, but sort of B grade movie companies that showed some interest but never really engaged.
Well, they wanted to sort of, they sort of saw it as like the middle part. So you would have like the traditional action hero who gets, dropped into this place and then fights his way out and then finds the people behind it and kills them. That was sort of
They wanted the moss and the dripping thing and the zombies and
they wanted like an Arnold Schwarzenegger type who would go and find the guys who built this place and then kill them. That was more that.
That would have been a completely different movie.
and then blow it up at the end.
Yeah,
because you've got to.
Because you got to blow it up. So that didn't happen. So meanwhile, I had applied to the Canadian Film Center, which is the Canadian equivalent of the American Film Institute, started by Norman Jewison, and is located here in Toronto. And by some miracle, and actually, at that time, when you submitted as a director resident, you had to have a feature script. So I submitted with Cube. I very fortunately got into the program and did the residency program, then applied for a short film. All the while, I kept going to their feature film division saying, They cube. And they kept saying no. But then I, again, very fortunately was able to make a short film there called Elevated, which is basically David trapped in an elevator with a couple other people. And as a kind of way to work out what I wanted to do with Cube, at that point thinking that Cube will probably never happen, which of course, ironically, because of that short film, they suddenly understood what I wanted to do with Cube. And then Cube was greenlit by the feature film project. So all of this is to say, to come back to your question, that the movie was made in this very special circumstance where it was both a professional film and a student film at the same time. So professional in that we had all the resources at our disposal, professional actors, professional crew, and so on, but there was no studio per se that was calling the creative shots. Like we were never, there was a little bit, the Film Center did have opinions and they would do certain things, but they never would cross that line of making us do something we absolutely didn't want to do. We were respected in a way that was really special. That's why the film, again, why I think it endured is it never went through that horrible development process that rounds off all the edges. And we were able to have an ambiguous ending.
I was just going to say, is that what enabled you to kind of like pick exactly who you saw in this role instead of going with like, oh, we think this person should be in like as this role?
Exactly. Like
you had control over that.
Had 100% control over the casting. Our only limitation was money and who was around, because we pretty much had to cast locally. But there's lots of actors in Toronto, so it was it was also the hardest, most painful process of my life, because even though we had all this creative control, we didn't have a lot of money. In fact, we really didn't have enough money to make the movie. So,
but even so, that was kind of the end of an era, though, because it was still shot on 35 millimeter film, which I don't think they ever did after that, right?
Well, filmmakers do that nowadays to be cool. They're like, this movie's shot on 35 mil.
Yeah. I've shot on film before, and I don't know why anyone would want to, because film was a pain in the ass. It really was.
It is, but it's very beautiful. And you're right. I think, actually, David, you're right. I think because after that, it was just Super 16, and then they, of course, went digital. Anyway, but it was, as always, like a confluence of like many, many things that permit us to do that. But so what I'm really saying is that even though it was a very difficult film to make, we had control, and yeah, we could cast anybody we want. And so when we said David is Worth and Andrew is Kazan, that was done like that. And then the other actors were all our first choice.
Which is really rare. Like that just doesn't happen. Even Treed Murray, they had to fight just to get me to do it. I mean, it was
great. And
get me on
Morris was very highly regarded at the point, had already been in Rude, which is another very successful Film Center movie. Wayne Robson is a well-known character actor who's been in Robert Altman movies. Everyone loves Nicole Labor and Nikki Gadani, who had just been in Crash. Like, it was a pretty, we were in our mid-20s. Like, it was pretty great situation And I don't believe the movie would have been made any other way. I don't think we couldn't have financed it on our own. It was too expensive for that. And I don't think any commercial, it was too, at that time, there really weren't any, or there are very few single location movies. They didn't really exist. It was only after that, when everyone got really poor, that people were no choice but to make single location movies, that there was a proliferation of them. But this was, I remember the note we always get from people is like, you can't just be in one set the whole time. That's not going to work.
You said you mentioned how the money was limited and everything, but I'm really curious about the cube. How did we do the cube? It was one set, right? But how long did it take to dress it? And what was the process of actually shooting the scenes with all the different colors? Because it's just
one cardboard box with two different lights.
how long did it take to reset it and change the lights and the panels and all this stuff? I'm very curious how that all went down.
Well, that was supposed to be more colors, weren't there, originally?
Well, it was 1.5 cubes, sort of, right? So that you could be in one and shoot kind of through the door, and it would look like you were in another room.
Yeah, it was kind of the bare minimum. It was the bare minimum. I could go on and on. By the way, we had an amazing production designer, Yaza Stefanovic.
Yeah, with no money at all. I mean, I don't know what the budget was for the set, but it was like,
It was gorgeous, and it was solid. Like, it was a real set. Like, it didn't feel like nothing wobbled. I mean, the doors, we had an issue with the first day where I sort of walked up to the door, opened the door, and it fell off the wall. It was like, I was like, oh crap, my first day I broke the cube. I think I know how we get out.
And broke the schedule.
And the schedule, that's right. The schedule went. It was, I mean, I remember that's when I first came up with my discovery that if a film is unpleasant to make, it's a lot more fun to watch. You know what I mean? Like, in a way that the camera, whether it's digital or video or 16 or 35, whatever, there's a chemical thing. There's something that happens there that it just picks up agony and despair or friction. You know what I mean? And it doesn't necessarily present it to you the way it actually happened in the world. But it was it was a tense shoot. It was, and it was at a time before LEDs, so all of the lights were these like crazy hot halogen lights. We were just schwitzing like hazards the entire time. I mean, it was like, and of course we had to. You're learning as you go along. You have to fill in. We had to fill in all of the little slots on the floors because people just kept going over on their ankles, and like it was just. I mean, it's because, of course, the walls are the same as the ceiling, the same as and again, it's not a complaint. I think it added to it. I mean,
well, especially at the end where you're like in your underwear, no boots or anything.
Well, it was a stroke of genius to make it so that you can change the color of the rooms to make this one set feel like many different sets. But I can't imagine how hot it was. Just in that like little room with all those lights on you.
Well, it was such a science experiment too, right? Because the different colors of the rooms would definitely affect the mood. We were in the red room. I was like ready to kill Morstein Wynn. I mean, that was, and I was only generally pissed off with him most of the time. And then when he got into the red room, I was just ready to murder him with a stick with part of the door. But
Speaking of those colors, is there what significance do the changing colors have? Is it just so you can differentiate that they're moving from point A to point B, or was there a deeper meaning behind like red and the green and the blue?
Well, I think the red was definitely chosen for the most tense scenes, right?
Was there a blue, or am I having a stroke?
Yeah, there's a blue.
There was a blue. Yeah.
There were supposed to be 6 colors, but we could only afford 5.
Okay.
What did you think about wasn't there didn't you time out how long it took to change the cube to start? You thought it was going to take, it was a half-hour process, and it ended up being, or you thought it was a 10-minute process and it ended up being a 45-minute process or something?
Nothing worked. We didn't have enough money. That was the problem. We didn't have enough money. So Yasna did a brilliant job designing and building the set, which was actually quite an expensive set given the nature or given the budget that we were working with. But there really wasn't time. I mean, it's always, even on very large movies, this always happens. There really wasn't enough time to test it. And so they didn't have time to refine it. And on the first day, as David said, that the doors didn't work. which presented a small problem because the whole movie is about people opening and closing doors. And I had constructed this schedule, which is very unusual for a movie or any kind of production, where we were actually going to shoot in sequence, which is very nice because then the actors and all of us get to see the story unfold in sequential time and kind of know where we've been and where we're going. And that and this, because of the nature of it being this contained one room movie, that was actually going to be possible. But because of the doors, we instantly had to throw that schedule out the window and go to the only scene where no one opens or closes doors. So we immediately went to the middle of the movie, to David's like 5-page speech. They had to like instantly learn 5 pages of dialogue on the second day.
Yeah, I remember you calling and going like, I'm so sorry, but can you learn all of your lines and do them tomorrow at 7 a.m.? I remember that. Oh, it's probably better that way. I didn't get a chance to think about it.
It's an amazing, I'm sure you know remember that sequence, like it's a kind of a tour de force performance from David. It was really,
is that the
really
scene where
amazing.
David starts looking real rough and that was just real?
You're all gonna die. Speaking of David's character, my next question for you guys would be like, so you have these dynamic character archetypes. You have the police officer who's like the alpha male. You've got the doctor who's kind of like the lady with the bleeding heart. You've got David Hewlett who's kind of like the nihilist in the situation. And you got the mathematician who's kind of like the innocent girl in the room who's like really smart. How did you come up with all these different characters, and did you know how they were going to work together going in, or was there like kind of like a natural way things fell into place while you were filming?
I'm not even sure how to answer that. It just sort of developed that way.
Because like as a viewer, I'm watching this. As soon as I start picking up on these different characters, I'm like immediately thinking they had to have known going into this beforehand that each character was going to do a particular thing.
I mean, yes, we knew that. Yeah, we knew that all of the characters had to have specific skills or skills/qualities that would come in handy, and we wanted that sort of with Quentin. We wanted that kind of reversal where you had here's who you thought would be the hero, and he kind of ultimately turns out to be the villain. And also with Wayne's character with the Wren, where I mean, ideally, if we'd had the money, that would have been like the movie star cameo. That would have been someone who, you would have assumed, okay, this is the guy who's going to bring everyone through, and he's killed. He's killed in the first 20 minutes. And then once that happens, you kind of think, well, anybody can be killed. Like there are no rules. You just throw out the rule book. But yeah, otherwise it really just kind of developed almost naturally. I mean, I don't.
But I have to say, I think David's character, and I don't think Andre will mind me saying this, I think David's character is Andre.
Well,
yeah, absolutely. I played him as Andre.
There's not a huge stretch. It's also not that far away from David either.
I remember the first, as soon as Morris started acting, I went, I'm gonna go really small. I remember thinking like, I'm just gonna be more and more like myself. It was like the first time I'd sort of experimented with being myself in a film, if that makes sense. Like I found that, just instead of trying to go for something, like become someone else, what if you just focused on making it as real as for yourself as possible? And I mean, it was just such a wonderful role. I mean, it's just, God, it was so, again, those speeches, those wonderful, I mean, admittedly, maybe not on the first day of shooting, but it was those wonderful speeches and this whole kind of like, just like, he was just such a cool character. And Andre's always been like that. Like Andre's been like this. Andre's like the guy, like we flail around and we're trying to come up with ideas. We're trying to say things and we're trying to explain what's happened to something. And Andre will just like in one beautiful sentence, just sum up. I remember like being at a short film festival, and everyone was like, wow, that film was this, and that film was this. And then there was this little lull in the conversation, and Andre says, there's nothing longer than a bad short film. And it was like, and it just summed up what works and what doesn't work in a thing. And that is Andre. Like, so yes, very much worth, I think.
So I wanted to ask you guys, so the first shot of the movie, which is right after the title sequence, David's passed out in the cube, and we see this hand come up from the bottom hatch, and it's Quentin. He's got blood on his hands. He pulls himself up. That's also, I think, the only instance of someone coming up from the bottom hatch in the entire movie, I think. But what was interesting is like we get the sense that Quentin probably either killed something or was going through some type of harrowing experience before he got to that room. Like there's almost like an entire sequence missing from the movie where Quentin kind of wakes up and goes through something traumatic. But I was just wondering, like, what was the backstory behind him finding Worth? Like, did he end up killing someone that he had previously met, or was that a side effect of one of the traps? Just out of curiosity.
He was wounded.
Okay.
Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly. But I think he says, I almost got my head cut off down there. I think that was the idea, is that he had just sort of narrowly escaped a trap.
I was thinking that was just a lie. Like he actually like killed someone.
Oh yeah, there's a whole community of people out there in the world who are like, Quentin killed people before he met the main crew.
Oh, that's interesting.
That is interesting. See, they're much smarter than we are.
Well, it's interesting, but then he has no arc. Then he's just a psycho right at the beginning.
Because originally Quentin was two characters.
Yes. Yeah.
There he was,
yeah.
and one of the. By the way, we'd be very neglectful. We didn't mention Graham Manson's contribution, because Graham also kind of finished the writing of the script, the final pass on it, after the Film Center said yes. And Graham is also
cheesy jokes.
Graham's famous for also with John Fawcett creating Orphan Black, and is now like a heavy-duty showrunner.
Snowpiercer?
Oh, is he doing Snowpiercer as well? Oh, wow.
I don't think he is anymore, but I think he was.
But Vincenzo, was the blood on the hands like a specific kind of like foreshadowing event of like, what he would eventually become? Or was it just like, oh, he's wounded?
I'm afraid it is just the most prosaic sequence. He was just wounded.
You guys are really peeling back the curtain on all the mystery.
That's awesome. No, I love this though. This is so cool.
You used to love Cube.
Used to think
this is the old Benny Hill skit where they get like the famous French new wave director and when you switch from color to black and white, it was so brilliant. It's like, oh, no, we ran out of money for the color film, black and white.
That's awesome.
You keep mentioning Orphan Black, and I love that show. How many episodes were you involved with, and what can you tell me about it? Because obsessed.
Yeah, I did direct one episode, yeah.
Okay.
Because I know those guys, so which was lots of fun. And it's an amazing thing. It's such an accomplishment that show just sort of punched above its weight, and it has such a wildly dedicated following. I mean, John. It frustrates me that John doesn't have more stuff, because John did two things that have gone on into the culture to become very, very influential. One was Ginger Snaps, which people still talk about today, 20 odd years later, and is highly influential. And I don't think anyone has made a better werewolf film since then.
No, they keep remaking the same kind of thing. They keep struggling with the same subject matter.
Yeah, they keep trying to do what he did and not succeeding. And then Orphan Black, which also had that very powerful, I don't want to say cult following, because that seems to kind of be diminishing it a little bit. I mean, it has.
You guys should get Fawcett on here. He's a fun guy to talk to too.
And the other writer that you mentioned, Graham Manson, right?
Mm-hmm.
He worked on Orphan Black too, didn't he?
Yeah.
They created it together. Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Graham and John were basically co-showrunners on that show, and so Graham went to the Film Center the same time I did. John went to the Film Center a few years before I did. We all sort of were in similar circles, and it was we were very fortunate. We kind of somehow fell in with a lot of really, really neat people.
Oh, and then also there's William Phillips, who did Treat Murray and Foolproof and stuff. He fixed the door issue, right? He was the one who fixed the
our second unit was a bunch of really, really talented filmmakers. So it was William Phillips, as he's known, who's done a number of features since. Scott Smith, who's like done a lot of features and a lot of important TV work. including The Magicians, show a lot of people
Oh,
like.
I love The Magicians too.
And
You should just be Canadian. Just come to Canada.
Right?
Yeah.
I love hockey.
There you
I
go.
want to be
There.
one of you guys.
There you go.
V, you had a question? Go ahead.
I got a couple really dumb, stupid questions. I'm going to embarrass the shit out
There's
of you
no
guys.
such
right?
We can do those.
thing.
We can answer those.
First off, did you ever consider casting Ice Cube in the movie?
We couldn't afford Ice Cube.
It's true. Yeah, that's true. Cube in the cube.
Yeah.
Also, and I'm kind of a collector nerd, right? I like props and memorabilia and stuff. Are the panels from the Cube out there somewhere, or did they all get blasted when the set got taken down?
Look, Hewlett's got one.
Hewlett, you little klepto.
I've got the Rubik's Cube. It was a promotional thing that Trimark did. And of course, I don't know how to solve a cube. So, but yeah, so they did a bunch of cool little promotional things for it. But did anyone keep the panels? Didn't you have a panel for a while?
Yeah, I
Vincenzo?
might even have one. I don't know. It's deep in storage if that is the case. But we kept a few of them. We gave Julian's head to David Cronenberg.
And what's he gonna do with it? You should have given it to me.
It's probably it's probably in a landfill somewhere now. But he gave us this really nice quote.
I could just see one of those panels with a LED light up kind of setup hanging on a wall in a studio.
Well, they basically invented the YouTuber studio.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what every YouTube studio looks like now, with a little panel of with a pattern behind it.
So, Vincenzo, there's another scene besides the opening scene, which is one of the most iconic, one of my favorite scenes because I have a weird, gruesome head in my brain in my head. Can you tell me a little bit about the filming of the acid face melting scene? Because that was gruesome and amazing, and I was like, oh my god, this is like Indiana Jones level incredible. And seeing that you guys were so constrained by the amount of money that you had available to you, you made that look like AAA, really, really good. So I want to know, what was the behind the scenes making of, and how you got that shot?
We had an amazing group of makeup effects artists who had a studio called Caligari. They more or less retired, but they all came from Gord Smith's shop. And if you know Gord Smith, he was kind of the king of the perfect replica. Like he did JFK's body for JFK, and he did a lot of Oliver Stone's films. So they came from the school of Gord Smith, and I remember Andre, when we were originally talking about the the cubing of Julian at the beginning, we always thought that would have to be a digital effect.
Yeah, we didn't know how that would be done, how you could actually do that. But they did it as a practical effect, which is amazing.
There's that's 100%, except for the mesh, the wire mesh is digital, but the rest of it was 100% Caligari's work. So they did it for cost, I'm sure, probably put money into it. And so that all of that amazing practical work is theirs. And then all of the digital effects, and I haven't looked at the film in a while, but they were done by a dear friend of ours, Bob Monroe, who at the time ran with William Shatner a visual effects studio called Core Digital Pictures, and this is in the early days of CGI, and they did all of the digital effects for nothing.
Wow!
It was donated. They did it at cost. So that kind of gives you a sense of, even though we didn't have much money, we had incredibly talented people who essentially invested a lot in the movie out of the goodness of their heart and, I guess, enthusiasm for the project.
Talk about awesome. A passion project.
Yeah, that's awesome.
This I'm going to embarrass Vincenzo here for a second, because this is the similarity I see between Vincenzo and Guillermo del Toro, where there's just a way of people, he gets excited about the stuff he wants to do, and that excitement is so sort of infectious that people, they want to be a part of it. They want to do their best work. They will do whatever they can to be a part of the little adventure that or the big adventure, as the case may be. And I think it's a very underappreciated talent of directors, is being able to do that. and Vincenzo and Guillermo. I've only seen those are the two people who I really see that kind of that love of what they do, bringing in these amazing talents to do stuff. Amazing talents like me,
Well, it's funny you should say that because actually, I Mimic, which was Guillermo's movie that he was making at the time, I think indirectly financed our visual effects because Core did the visual effects for Mimic. And I would see, when I was looking at our effects, occasionally I'd see this big guy over at the other end of the studio looking at a monitor like this. And I had no idea who he was, but that was Guillermo.
Didn't you end up doing some like storyboard stuff for him on Mimic or something, or helping out on something there? Or?
No, I didn't know what the hell Mimic was, except that Core was doing it. So
right.
But I sure appreciated it because otherwise I don't think they would have been able to do the work on our film.
I wanted to ask you guys, so obviously this movie spawned at least 2 sequels and a Japanese remake. Did you guys have anything to do with those? And if not, like, what was your opinion on them?
Has anyone seen them, out of curiosity? Have any of you guys seen them?
I saw the second one.
I haven't seen any of them because I wasn't in them.
Our involvement, I think, was limited to a conference call with, was it Trimark or Lionsgate? Whoever owned the rights at that point. And yeah, it was basically, I had a very vague idea for a sequel that they had zero interest in.
Oh, tell me about your idea, please.
Well, it was so David's character.
I like it already.
Survives. He somehow survives. He isn't dead. He ends up in a hospital, and basically he has this life that he has he doesn't know how he got anywhere. So he ends up in a hospital. He doesn't know how he got there. He can't tell anybody about any of this because who's going to believe him? He has an apartment that he's never seen before. He has a bank account with money in it that gets replenished that he's never seen before.
And a beautiful girlfriend?
Maybe. But he can't let it go. He can't just resume his life. He has to try to figure out who's behind all of this. So it would have been a kind of a different Kafka-esque thriller than Cube. And weirdly, it seems like kind of what Squid Game is going for its second season. It seems something along those lines.
Like Squid Game. I definitely felt like Squid Game.
Yeah. But that was it. I mean, I never really developed it beyond that because they were, they just wanted basically another remake.
Maybe now's the time.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that at all.
You should sell it to one of those. Sell it to one of those Korean studios.
Yeah, turn it into a series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in a way, it has the same problem as the Jaws sequels, which is you have to have the shark, but as soon as you have the shark, you're just repeating the same beats over and over again.
Yeah,
that was one of the cool things I liked about Cube was that we don't have
no
idea who the bad guys are.
Or the orchestrators.
They're just inserted into this thing.
I love
and you're
the
like,
idea.
What's going on?
I love the idea that it's aliens. I'm all in. Like, yep, aliens did it.
Yeah, the scene where they're theorizing over like what the story is was probably one of the most intriguing parts of it because I could see us four being trapped in a cube and being like, Alex is the alien guy, Vader's the government conspiracy dude.
Yeah.
Just eat me first.
I mean, they should really do a series about it. Like, they should really do a Cube series where they could just throw different people in every week. It'd be great.
I'll tell you my story. I had a Cube series pitch that the Sci-Fi Channel wanted to do. That ultimately I said no to because they would not commit to a series, and it started to feel like, they basically just want a Cube TV movie.
Huh. That's them calling now.
Jesus Christ! Hold on, I gotta
take this. Yeah, hi, sci-fi. Yeah.
Don't you mean Sifi?
Or sorry, Sifi. Yeah.
Quit giving that little silly podcast all your good stuff.
So what was your idea for the series?
It was a lot like Lost, but it was before Lost. I'm sure it would not have been as good as Lost, but the idea was the Cube in this sort of alternate version is like a bridge between these other environments that are also puzzle-like in nature, but they're more like real-world environments. So you would pass, if you got through the cube, you'd pass through it into, say, an airport. And there would be basically a puzzle in the airport that you have to solve to get to the next cube. And the main character in the cube that we're following is gradually realizing that he built the goddamn thing.
You mean me?
You. Yeah, basically.
Wow.
And
I liked Andre's better because it started with "I survived."
But yeah.
So my last question
That's cool though. Now I want that series.
Yeah, I do.
I know, I
kinda
want it
wanted to,
too, yeah.
I'm in. If you guys want to do it, I'm in. I'll watch it for sure. I'll support the GoFundMe. I guess my question would be for Andre, but I think Vincenzo, you might have your own opinion on this as well. But we've talked a little bit about how like the culture around this movie has kind of like people insert their own ideas and what they think is the meaning behind things. The ending is very much like a blank slate. Literally, it's a bright white light, and Kazan like walks out into it. And there's a line beforehand that says like nothing out there but human suffering or something along those lines. For the writers and directors, the people who made the movie, what does that represent to you as you were writing it? What was the answer for you? What is he walking into?
What is he walking into? It is escape. I think it is freedom. However you want to interpret that. I mean, you could mean, life after death. If he's going into a white light, it can mean, literal freedom that he's going back into the real world. But he does get out. I think that was in our original script. Everyone dies, which was a little too bleak. Just felt a little too dark. So
for Andre, it's a happy ending. Vincenzo, do you agree, or do you have your own ideas?
No, we're totally simpatico on that. That was the idea. But I think what that gets it to is, we got a lot of pushback when we were making the film and afterwards about not saying who's behind this thing. And Andre and my answer to that was always, we're never going to be ambiguous about how they get out. Like, the story is about how do they solve the puzzle? How do they get out? And we felt that bought us the freedom to not say why it exists. And partly because I don't think there is a good answer. I don't think there's an interest. I mean, there are answers for what it could be. I don't think there's an answer that's as interesting as the journey they take. And it's just much more interesting to leave it to the audience's imagination.
No matter what you came up with, it would be unsatisfying, whether it is aliens, whether it is purgatory or hell, or, whether they're toys like the Twilight Zone episode.
And part of that ambiguity is what's, I think, kept this movie going for so long, is because it allows people to kind of come up with their own thoughts and theories on, like, what's this world of the cube,
Well, and that's the best science fiction, is the stuff that spawns your own ideas, that gets your own imagination going. And I mean, that's
definitely lends itself to allegory. I mean, that's.
So I wanted to ask you guys, one of the most intriguing parts of this film is like the characters working through the mystery of how to navigate the cube, and there's like a lot of math and like prime numbers and all that stuff. How did you guys come up with, this like really convoluted way of like figuring out, okay, how do we navigate the cube?
We didn't. we got somebody who was much smarter than us.
The only thing we had is the idea of the number of numbers by the doors representing like coordinates that you could. I mean, that seemed like a natural thing. And then it was actually Vincenzo's ex-girlfriend's brother was a math professor at a university.
He wasn't
somewhere.
even a professor at that point, wasn't he? Like still like it is. Wasn't
Or
he still
maybe he was still a student. I don't know. He might have been a professor.
He was a TA. He was a TA, I think.
TA. That's it. Right.
Anyway, he had a PhD in math, so we would literally meet with him and try and explain what we wanted, and he would say all this stuff that we didn't understand at all, and we kept getting him to repeat it to dumb it down enough that we could understand it. And then we literally just leave like a blank to like write in tech or something. I think we did what Star Trek writers did, was just like basically leave it blank so that somebody else could fill it in, and then we'd send him a copy of the script and say, "Here, fill this in." So I mean, I still don't know if any of the math in it actually works or not. I assume it does.
Oh, somebody out there knows.
That's hilarious to me. I love it.
But he took it very seriously. He built a virtual model of the cube that was,
Of course he did. He's a math guy.
yeah. His specialty was statistics, and he built a 5 cube by 5 cube model that actually worked. That did the was based. And by the way, this is also Andre's fabulous invention. Is that effectively, conceptually, what the cube is a combination lock, so that it open for a moment it opens when the cubes are in a certain configuration. That is the very, very clever conceit behind how the puzzle works. It's just entirely Andre's, and then David just found a way to mathematically justify that. But he did it with
the other David.
Other David.
The other, not that guy.
Yeah, just smart on TV.
Sorry, David Pravica did it for us as partly an exercise, I think, for himself. He created this 5 by 5 cube in the computer. It was very, very complex. He said if you wanted to create one that was the actual size of our cube in the movie, he would get another PhD. It was very, very complex math.
Yeah, aliens for sure. Got it.
Man, I'd love to get a hold of that. Because it would have been running on those old computers too.
There are a couple of mistakes in the film, though, aren't there? I mean, somebody's mentioned them, but I don't know.
I don't know, maybe.
Normally I go into a movie and because we're the Salty Nerd podcast, I'm like, oh, you like to just kind of jab fun at it. But I was so lost in just the insanity of this film. I'd never bothered to nitpick it. I was like, it works. Good to go.
You're just banging your head against the wall.
I'm like, I guess I could be like, where'd those spikes come from? Do they slide together, or are they all one piece? How does that work? I could nitpick that, but really the movie's it kind of just does a really good job of sucking you into
I
the
can explain
universe.
how the spikes work.
Oh, yes, please go for it.
What do you got?
Oh, well, they roll into themselves. If you look carefully, you can see it. So they're if you can imagine a very thin material that is in a cone shape that is wrapped so that when they can compress into themselves.
Okay.
So if you look at if you look at them, you can actually see those lines within the spike as,
so they're
as they retract.
Coiled like a snake.
That's awesome.
Kind of.
Right on.
I thought it was kind of interesting, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think the cube only kills 2 people, and the rest of the people died from each other, right?
Die in the opening, and Ren are the ones who die of the cube. Everybody else dies because of each other.
Craziness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People. Hell is other people.
Yeah.
Still is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, David, you kind of joked about wanting to kill Maurice, the guy who played Quentin. What was your relationship with him like on set?
We were so mean. It was Andre. Sorry, not Andre. Andrew Miller and I. We were never fans of actors. We've just, even though we were actors, it was a self-loathing thing that we then put onto other people. And Morris was a very serious actor, and we had no time for that. So we were, it was, and he was very, very good. I mean, this is something I got to say that I've got better at in my old age. But he was just very good at demanding when he wanted another take. He damn well got another take or whatever, And I was always like, come on, for the team, we got to get it in one and all that kind of stuff. So it was just a different approach to the acting thing. And I think somewhere in the middle is probably the right way of doing it. But as a result, oh my God, every word he said grated on my nerves. every opportunity I had to make his life misery, I did.
So the animosity between your two characters wasn't acting.
Oh, I don't think so. No. I mean,
But for the record, Morris is a lovely. Yeah,
he's a lovely guy. He's absolutely lovely guy.
guy.
I was younger and saltier, shall we say? And I was also with Andrew Miller, and he never brings out the best in people.
Jude has one last question for you guys. Go
Actually,
ahead.
I have 2. I have one that's about Cube, and I have one about something else. I was just wondering, David, which murder cube was your favorite?
Oh God. I mean, I got to say that first. I remember watching the movie for the first time, and I got into the theater, and it went dark, and it was like a screening of some sort, and I suddenly went, oh my God, what if it sucks? Because it had never occurred to me that Andre and Vincenzo could do anything other than stuff that I loved. Because I've just loved everything that I've been a part of with him, their stuff in the past. And I suddenly went, oh God, what if it's terrible? And I started watching the movie, And it was like that first scene. I will never forget that. I was just like, I was there. I saw that thing fall apart. I mean, like, and I'm like, this is never going to work. And it just sucked me in. So I got to say that's haunted me. That first image, just because it was such a wonderful feeling of both relief and just so proud and excited to watch this movie. I mean, it was just amazing. Yeah.
Well, it's also funny that the first scene and the last 15, 20 minutes never ever changed from the first draft.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Well done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay, my last question is for Vincenzo. So I know that you did an episode of American Gods, and I was just wondering if the set was just complete chaos.
Well, if Vincenzo's directing, maybe.
Once I got there.
You crashed that whip and you got everybody into shape.
No, you need another podcast for that.
So that's a yes.
Listen, as you probably, if you know anything about me, I'm a huge Brian Fuller fan. I think Brian and Michael Green, who's his co-showrunner, are honestly brilliant. Michael, who, co-wrote Blade Runner 2049, many, many other things. Those guys are in another kind of on another intellectual plane. And I've worked with a lot of showrunners, and there's nobody better, no one more creative, no one more audacious. So so there will be a lot to unpack. They definitely had issues, and I wouldn't even want to. I wasn't there for when that stuff went down. I just kind of came in when it was like everyone was free. It's funny, if you ever had this experience where you're walk in a room and everybody's freaking out and you don't know why. So it had that air to it. But like David said, and I don't know what you thought of that show, but out of that, something amazing came. Like, I thought the show was incredible, and it looked fantastic, and all of the chaos was not at all visible. And I think that, and I'll tell you, I read the first 3 scripts long before it was made. I was so excited. I had wanted to make a Neil Gaiman movie. I was supposed to have done Neverwhere. Unfortunately, the producers saw the film that I made with David called Nothing, and it immediately fired me.
Oh, no.
What? Seriously? Hey, keep me out of this.
Shots fired. Not because of David. Believe me, it had nothing to do with David. But I, as I'm sure we all do, I have great affection for Neil Gaiman's work, and when I had finished working on Hannibal. But I found out, Brian's doing American Gods. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. I just thought that was amazing. And then when I read the scripts, they are the best scripts I've ever read for anything. I mean, it was stunning. So he's brilliant. And it was Michael too. It was the two of them.
I read his Munsters pilot as well. He did a Munsters pilot that was just was it the Munsters? I think it was.
Yeah, yeah. It was called. They had a different name. It was called. What was it called?
Something Lane or something. The show. It didn't come out the way the script was written, but the script had me in tears. I couldn't get over how beautiful it was. Beautiful.
So anyway, there were problems that had a lot to do with money in the studio, and there's just a certain way to work with Brian and Michael, and the studio wasn't. Anyway, I wasn't there, so I shouldn't even comment. But from chaos, I thought something really wonderful happened. And I remember I was going to do the first episode of the second season, and all of a sudden I heard, they're fired. So that's what happened.
Yeah, I was so curious because I'm a huge fan of the book. I loved the first season. And then after I saw the first season, all of this stuff kind of came out about how chaotic the set was. So I just kind of wanted to get your take on it to see if that was accurate. Because you're absolutely right. It's beautiful.
I'll tell you what happened very, very briefly. They didn't have enough money, and so in an effort to save money, from this is as I understood it, from pressure, as a result of pressure from the studio, they cross-boarded the first 3 episodes. That means they took the first 3 episodes and they shot it like a movie, and it's very difficult to do that in TV. because it's just not the way things are structured. And so they got woefully behind schedule, and it just started going wildly over budget. And it just snowballed, like they got off on the wrong foot. So it was just about money, really. And they ended up going way, 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 way over budget by the end. And that as a result, they had to lose an episode from the end. It created this domino effect. But no one would know it watching it, so why is it a big deal? It's just because the studio spent a lot more money than they wanted to.
Can you guys let us know like what you're working on now, what you got up next that's coming out real quick?
I'm working on my shoulders. As soon as I get them back, as soon as I get movement back in my shoulders, I look forward to
Let us know
doing
how that
even more of nothing.
physio is going for you.
Yeah. Andre, do you have anything on the books right now that you're working on?
I just work in disposable Canadian television as an editor right now, which I have to get back to.
Oh, that's right. You got to run, don't you?
Yeah, I got
Yeah, both of you. Vincenzo, do you have anything that you're working on currently that you'd like to let people know about?
There's a few things coming down the pike. One of them is what David and I did together, which is part of Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities, which is a horror anthology for Netflix. And David is brilliant in it. And it's not a one-man show exactly, but
In my mind, it was.
it pretty much is, and he's spectacular.
It's really fun. That whole series, I can't wait. It's an amazing bunch of directors and writers, and of course you've got Guillermo at the head of it, just keeping art front and foremost instead of budget.
As soon as we heard about that, you were talking about like you had a gig and you had this giant handlebar mustache, and I was like, oh, we're watching that.
Yeah,
you won't be disappointed.
It'll be great. All right, guys, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you all for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Don't forget to comment below what you think. How many times have you watched Cube? What kind of theories do you have about it? Let us know in the comments below. And let's head out of here. Vader, where can they find you on the socials, bud?
You can find me on the social media stuff pretty much everywhere at MattVader74. David, it's always cool to talk to you, man. And
I love it. Anytime.
Andre and Vincenzo, thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
thank you. It was fun.
We just,
Yeah.
you guys all talking to our silly little podcast it means the world to everybody here. So yeah,
It really does.
Thank you so much.
Jude, where can they find you at?
You can find me at IamJudeJuju on Instagram and on TikTok. And you can find me at thevoiceofjude.com on my website where you can check out my voiceover work. Gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for making the time for this.
Love it.
The delight.
Yeah.
And Matthew Kadish, where can they find you at, bud?
You can find me at Matthew Kadish, Kadish on Twitter. KadishBooks.com takes you to my Amazon page. And gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all these insights of this amazing movie. I could talk to you about it for hours, but I will spare you that. And just getting to hear, filmmakers talk about their movies and get that insight into it, it's very special. And I'm very appreciative that you guys take the time to do that, and that it's obvious you're all friends, and you come on a podcast made by four friends, and it feels good to have you on here. So thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Love it.
Yeah, group therapy.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Thank you. You guys can find me on our Discord app. Go to saltynerdiscord.com. I'm there every day chatting with people about movies and nerdy stuff and great things like that. But gentlemen, thank you so much for being on with us. I'm going to basically repeat what Kadish said. As a movie nerd, somebody who just consumes these things, having the people behind the curtain on to chat with just some dude with a webcam and a microphone, it's a true pleasure, and I love getting to know you guys and the people behind the magic. It's so much fun. So thank you guys for taking the time out of your very busy lives. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to having you on again sometime and your future projects for sure. David, Andre, Vincenzo, thank you all so much. And everybody else, stay salty, my friends.
Stay salty.
Stay salty.